Leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Ian Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 8 on LBC. I'm Ian Dale. Welcome to Wednesday's Cross Question. On my panel tonight, we have two debutants. To my left, the first one, Tony Earnshaw, is founder and chief executive of UK Commercial Group, a cleaning and facilities management company. Next to him is Sir Alex Shelbrooke, Conservative MP for Wetherby and Easingwold, who's also the vice president of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. To my right is Lucy Reid, a columnist for The New World. She's actually appeared on the programme before. I wonder if anybody listening can identify when that was. Text me on 84850. You won't win a prize because we don't do prizes. But we have drawn first prize in the Lottery of Life by having Barry... I'm sounding like Giles Brandreth, aren't I? By having Barry Gardner, Labour MP for Brent West, on the panel tonight. They're here to take your calls, your questions on 0345 6060 973. And if you've never watched us before, you might want to switch us on Global Player, the LBC app, or the LBC YouTube channel.
Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Cross Question. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app. This is LBC.
Right, let's go to our first question. It's on WhatsApp from Catherine, who says, will not taking us into an aimless and illegal war be Keir Starmer's key act and legacy as Prime Minister? So will not taking us into an aimless and illegal war be Keir Starmer's key act and legacy as Prime Minister? Barry Gardner.
Well, look, you will know, Ian, that I've had my own criticisms
you have indeed
of the way in which Sir Keir has led our party. But on this, I think he got it absolutely right. I said at the time of the statement that I was there when we took the decision on Iraq, and we needed no persuasion that Saddam Hussein was a bad and evil man. What we did need to be assured of was that there was a legal basis for the conflict and that it had a clear exit strategy, and it had neither. Neither did this war. And I think we're seeing the repercussions.
Did you vote for the war in Iraq?
I did. It was a mistake which I made, and I hope I've learned from, and I hope the Labour Party has learned from. And I think that the way in which Sir Keir has handled this was really important. On this issue of legacy that Catherine asked, if you look back, and you will remember the days of Harold Wilson, and I think
only vaguely.
Oh, go on. But you
hang on.
back,
I was 13 when he left office.
Well,
Thank
you. As I say, you had a functioning memory then. But what I wanted to point out was the things that we remember him for were, one, the creation of the Open University, and two, the fact that he kept Britain out of the Vietnam War. It was a very substantial legacy. And I think, Keir has done well in judging what is a very difficult tightrope to walk internationally in terms of global geopolitics.
Alex Shelbrooke, I suspect you might disagree with that.
Well, I think we're getting slightly confused in our definitions. What are we describing as a war? The conversation, the answer Barry just said, has gone immediately back to the Iraq conflict, which was a very different situation indeed. And the questions around the legality of that war have gone on for years, with one side and another. I don't personally cast comment on that. This is an Israeli-American-led war. We have not been asked to take part in it in the way that we were with the Iraq War, and neither have any other countries. What was asked was whether we could use, whether the Americans could use Diego Garcia and whether they could use the air bases. And I think it was a mistake to say no to that, because the Prime Minister is constantly talking about de-escalation. Who's listening? Who in the White House is now listening, having been told that you can't use the facilities that were there, which we had an agreement you would be used? So going into a war, what does that sound like to people? How are people interpreting that? Are they interpreting that we take part in the actual preemptive action going in the first wave? We weren't asked to do that. Are we people thinking we're going to put troops on the ground like we did in Iraq? That's not this war. Should we be protecting the British sovereign bases that are fired upon? Yes. Yes, we should.
Well, that's what Keir Starmer
But
said.
that is a very different place. But he hasn't done that. He's not saying that. We've made it crystal clear. I actually really liked Kemi's line last week about don't try and catch the arrow, take out the archer. But that's a very different operation to saying you're going into the war and taking part in this war with America and Israel. And I am not clear of the objectives that the White House have on this conflict, to be blunt. I'm really not clear. As this has gone on, I'm really struggling to see what it is trying to achieve. When Donald Trump said this week we've almost achieved our objectives. Well,
if you can't see what the objectives are, how can you be in support of what they're doing?
No, what I said was they asked to use access of the bases that we have an agreement for them to use, and we said, no, you can't, for whatever reasons that we've had different legal opinions on that as well. The problem with that is that you're not in the room influencing anything because the phone's getting put down. And we've had different readouts about what happened with the Prime Minister's conversation with the President. Pays your money, takes your choice. But, undoubtedly, it's the easy answer in politics and in foreign affairs to say if we de-escalate the situation, things will improve. Well, yeah, quite. I mean, where does that go? I mean, so how do we define the war, Ian? That's the question.
All right, Lucy Reid.
I have to agree with Barry, to be honest. And I also think that something that Starmer said today in PMQs about it is the single biggest decision a Prime Minister takes, whether to bring his country into a war, rang true. And I do think he did make Badenoch and Farage look silly in the fact
Tony Blair said exactly the same thing in 2003.
I suppose, but I still think the point stands that Badenoch and Farage 1 week ago were saying that we should have gone all in, back to Trump, that Starmer was pathetic for not hitching his horse to the US as well.
Badenoch, she didn't actually say that. She did not say that we should be with the Israelis and the Americans sort of launching the attacks. I mean, Keir Starmer alleged that's what she said today.
But she was critical of him.
If she was critical of him for not giving the Americans permission to use the bases that they have in this country.
But from Starmer's perspective, giving the Americans the bases at that point would have been more involved than he was willing to be at a war that he alleges was illegal at that point of the Strait. When he is allowing UK bases to be used now, shipping HMS Dragon out now, I mean, from his perspective, that's to say, well, we're protecting UK interests. Our bases are RAF bases. But I just agree with Barry in that, with Harold Wilson's legacy as well, not letting the UK get dragged into a foreign war that is hugely unpopular, not just in the UK, in the US as well. And that's where I do have to agree with you that I have no idea what Trump's objective here is as well. I don't think he does, to be honest. And I do think, one thing I will say, I do think Starmer could have made more of his sort of Hugh Grant in Love Actually moment in sort of standing up to Trump.
If you're going to do that, you might as well make the most
That's
of it.
what I'm saying. I think it would have played well with the right sort of people, and he'd sort
Ed Davey would have been delighted with it, wouldn't he?
Yes.
Right, Tony Earnshaw, what's your view?
I think that Keir Starmer will be remembered as the Prime Minister who let down America and who spoilt the special relationship between the UK and America. Again, it's in delay from him. We've sent HMS Dragon over there, which is at least 8 days late. By the time it gets there, the war actually could be over. I think yet again, it's weak politics from Keir. And I think, yes, we should have been involved from day one. The second some of our military bases were hit in another country, it's an attack on the UK as far as I'm concerned. And we should be defending that. And we should then be attacking if they are attacking us.
So do you think this all stems from that decision that he made not to allow the Americans to use RAF Fairford and Diego Garcia as well? And there's the long-term consequences of that are going to be quite massive, aren't they?
Yeah, they're going to be huge. America's our biggest ally, as we know, and we should be supporting them at all times. It doesn't have to be an offensive attacking situation. It could be defensive. And again, we were late to the party, dither and delay.
Barry, what do you think the long-term consequences of this are going to be with regard to the relationship between Britain and America? Because you rightly made the comparison with Harold Wilson. I mean, there were consequences to that. I think one of our listeners texted in the other day and said, of course, Lyndon Johnson, the then American president, wouldn't come on a state visit to the UK because of it. Now we've got the King going to America on a state visit, I think, in April. I mean, this is something that is going to reverberate down the years, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Look, but to pick up on what Tony was saying, I think actually the person who has spoiled the special relationship actually was Donald Trump, and I think he did it before the Iran war. I think he did it by just tearing up the international rules-based order, by imposing tariffs on allies as well as commercial enemies.
Well, some of them tariffs were reciprocal tariffs. At the end of the day, we were only given a 10% tariff in this country, probably the lowest tariff in the whole of the world, if not Europe, for definite.
Yeah, and that was the value of Keir Starmer going and actually presenting that letter about the invitation to the King and basically eating humble pie and pandering to Donald Trump's
narcissism.
Thank you.
Anytime.
But look, there is a huge shift in the global order at the moment. This is not just a small difference between the UK and the US. We're seeing a huge shift in the global order, and if you look at what's happened with not just Iran, but with the way in which America went in, took out Maduro, came to an agreement with Maduro's successor that the oil will now not be sold to Iran and to China as it was being. I mean, this is part of a much wider strategic play that America is coordinating. And the reason it's doing so, because if in the end they do get a compliant leadership in Iran, and if they were to get control of Greenland, as President Trump also wanted, they would have effective control of 40% of the world's oil. Now, the key thing here is not actually having the oil. It's making sure that the petrodollar is the international reserve currency, because that's what keeps American economy as high as it is. And the real fear that America had, both of Venezuela and of Iran, was that they were selling oil for rubles and renminbi. And of course, that was undermining the petrodollar's status as the reserve currency of the world. So there are huge shifts going on here, and it's power politics coming into play that says the international rules-based order, which said you don't just go in and take out a foreign president, has really been cast aside.
So they are a perspective about the oil situation. The reality was that you're almost back to Cuba 62 with Russia and Iran were getting a foothold in Venezuela, influencing that entire region. That moves beyond oil. And when I look at it from the geostrategic security point of view, the special relationship is not just about the people who are leading the countries. It's not about Donald Trump. It's not about Keir Starmer. It's about the military alliances that we have built during and since the Second World War.
100% agree.
And we are not seen, and take my word for this in the conversations I had, and I'm in Washington again next week, we are no longer seen as a reliable ally. And that is exceptionally worrying. And that's got nothing to do, Barry, that's got nothing to do with the White House and who's running it now. But is that where there were agreements in place to use the bases, and we capitulated at that moment in time.
Let's talk about reliable allies. What reliable ally is it that says, I am prepared to attack a NATO ally?
Yeah, I agree, Barry.
Greenland.
Barry, I agree with all of that. But this is important.
Let me just make a point, because it is important.
Because I know where you're going to go. But this is what's important about this.
But the audience may not
make his point.
But Congress were not going to let that happen. That's when you work behind the scenes. This is bigger than the man in the Oval Office. It's bigger than the Prime Minister. It's about the relationships that are in place.
But you say Congress would let it happen. They've let Iran happen.
Well, there's a difference, because the what's happened in Iran couldn't be used to be stopped in Congress in terms of NATO, you see. So in terms of breaking up the Washington Treaty and being able to effectively break that and invade, Congress would have a say on that. But the congressmen I speak to are crystal clear that that wasn't going to happen. But what's more important is that there are tens of thousands of American troops and equipment in Europe. And the situation in Europe is at its most deadly since the Second World War. Let's not talk about the Cold War, since the Second World War. And I don't understand what's going on in Iran. I don't. And maybe we'll find out what his intentions were later. I stopped understanding what was going on when about 48 hours ago he said, our objectives have almost been achieved. Well, I'm struggling to see, apart from smashing the place up, what they are.
Strangely, 20 minutes after he put the phone down to Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, and I mean, again, this is where you move it away from the man sat behind that desk to where are the strength of the strategic military alliances. And what worries me in all
but
of this is
But he's the commander-in-chief, Alec. He's the commander-in-chief, and you talk about unreliability, right? How much more unreliable can you get than to threaten a NATO ally, which would involve invoking Article 5 to defend Greenland against yourself?
Barry, that's fine. I'm not defending Donald Trump. Barry, I'm not defending Donald Trump. I wasn't the Prime Minister who went there on bended knee trying to say, stab me in just one leg as you stabbed Europe in two. I mean, that's great, isn't it? He capitulates to Trump all the time. Then he makes this one act. Now he tries to pretend that he can actually influence things and say de-escalate it. And it's simply, they're not going to be listened to.
Right. We will continue this in just a moment. We do have to go to a break. It's 8:20.
This is LBC. Cross Question with Ian Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
8:21 on LBC. Barry Gardiner is here, Labour MP for Brent West. Sir Alex Shelbrooke, Conservative MP for Wetherby and Easingwold. Tony Earnshaw, founder and chief executive of UK Commercial Group. And Lucy Reid, columnist for The New World, who was on this programme during the 2024 general election when we did what did we call it? A youth cross question. Youth hustings. And you were representing?
The Labour Party.
And you've moved into journalism now. How are you finding it all?
I mean, I'm loving it. I love writing for The New World. It's fantastic.
Which used to be, everything's former now, isn't it? It's the newspaper formerly known as the New European.
Yes.
With Alistair Campbell and your editor Matt, who started it. Give him my regards. Right, let's go to another question. It's from Andrew, who says, Sir Keir Starmer said that if he knew then what he knows now, he would never have appointed Peter Mandelson to the position of US ambassador. Does the panel think that if the Labour Party knew then what they know now about Keir Starmer's judgment, he would have been appointed as Labour leader? And will the PM survive these latest Mandelson revelations? I'm so tempted to go to Barry first again, but I'm going to let him work out his diplomatic answer. Tony, let's start with you.
Well, look, I run a company, a national company across the country, and when I take on an employee, it's important that I do my due diligence. And I check that that person who I'm taking on within my company has the right qualifications, is DBS checked because we work in care homes and schools, and is the right person for the job. I do reference checks. And I own a company. Keir Starmer is the Prime Minister of this country, and he is telling us that he hasn't completed simple checks. For me, it's an absolute disgrace. I feel like Peter Mandelson's been using a bit of a scapegoat at the moment. For which is Keir Starmer's mistakes.
He's being used as a scapegoat. That's an odd way of putting it.
Well, I think that he's been a bit sanctimonious, isn't he? And as far as I'm concerned, he's made the mistakes. He's appointed this member of staff who he's known for years. It's one of the old Labour boys who he's brought in as US ambassador to the US. And I just think that he hasn't done his checks.
But on the face of it, I mean, to play devil's advocate for a second, on the face of it, he was ideally suited. He knew a lot about trade. We wanted to get someone in who would persuade Trump not to treat us like the EU, give us a better deal. Well, Peter Mandelson, I think you could say, helped in that process. He'd been on the European Commission. He'd been a British cabinet minister on, was it 2 or 3 occasions? 3 occasions.
And he managed
to have a lot of experience.
Why did he have to do it on 2 or 3 occasions?
And he managed to negotiate us 10% tariffs, so he did do the job. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Keir Starmer, who hasn't checked effectively his employees, who he's appointing in a very high up job, and he hasn't.
But would you expect the Prime Minister of this country to do all the due diligence? Would he not leave that to his Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, and other people around him?
In 2008, Epstein was put in prison. In 2009, Peter Mandelson stopped at his house in New York, and he remained friends with him until 2011. Keir Starmer knew that, yet he still appointed him, and he was warned of the risks of employing this person. That's effectively what he's doing.
Okay. Lucy.
I mean, I think there's a point to be made that Morgan McSweeney, as the one who pushed for the appointment of Mandelson, which by all accounts he very much was, has now been sacked. Pushed to resign, we can probably assume. And he's essentially taken the blame for that. Starmer has admitted he's made a mistake. To say that Mandelson is being used as a scapegoat, these are Mandelson's issues that we're talking about. He's under police investigation. And I don't think that Keir Starmer is necessarily shying away from the conversation. The government they're releasing these documents. We're talking about them now. And to be honest, I don't think anything came out in the documents today that was that shocking. Obviously, there's one that's been heavily redacted that is being used in the Met investigation currently, which is probably going to have the most explosive content in it. To me, the biggest shock in it was that Mandelson demanded £500,000, and that wasn't even that much of a
Why
shock.
are you shocked by that?
I wasn't even shocked by that, exactly. I was shocked by the figure, but then when I thought about it for more than 2 seconds, I was like, oh, that makes sense. Yes, of course it's shocking. Of course it's not going to wash well with the public. And of course, if we were all sitting here right now and say, would you appoint Peter Mandelson to be your ambassador, we would all say no. But to say that he's being used as a scapegoat is, I think, quite a strange.
What about the point we were talking about in the last hour of the programme, where we were contrasting Keir Starmer's judgment on the war in Iran, which, from the general public point of view, I mean, there is an uptick in Labour's support in the opinion polls, and I think his personal ratings are probably going to go up. But then you contrast that with the judgment on this issue, and you think, well, yeah, although I suppose you could say, well, making the right judgment call on a war is much more important than appointing an ambassador.
Yes. But I also think it doesn't really help the perception that Starmer is not the one driving the train. I mean, for all of the allegations that have been lobbed at him that it's McSweeney's vision, McSweeney is the puppet master, he's been, telling Starmer what to do, and Starmer just says, oh, yes, I'll follow. If you then look at what's come out about Mandelson, to then basically go, oh, yeah, well, that was all McSweeney pushing that, it was all McSweeney's fault, you're basically admitting that that was true, essentially, that he was just following, dancing to McSweeney's tune. So I think he's stuck. It's a bit of a rock and a hard place there, because you either admit that he was in full control of all the appointments and was 100% leading the ship of the new government's vision, and therefore is entirely responsible for the appointment of Mandelson, or he wasn't. But I don't think that the latter being the case that the government makes is going to come as a shock to anyone.
Alec.
Well, I think, first of all, let's not lose sight of the fact that we had an excellent ambassador to the United States in Dame Karen Pierce. And I know Dame Karen, met her on several occasions when I've been in the States. She knew all the wrinkles of Washington.
Has she ever hosted a reception for you, though?
She's hosted a reception for the NATO Parliamentary Assembly.
She hosted one specially for me once.
And
I
you'll know
no ill of her
brilliant
whatsoever.
ambassador she is. And she was well respected, and she crucially knew how to get on with the previous Trump administration, which, let's face it, was utterly chaotic, far more than this one is. And so she would have been well placed. So be under no illusion, to have a political appointment to an ambassadorial role as big as the American role, and there are very, very few political appointments. There are some notable ones, but there are few. And taking out somebody who was so well regarded seemed to me they were hell-bent on doing it. And I think that what has emerged is that the Prime Minister was aware of what the concerns were around Peter Mandelson. And as I believe it to be, the last Labour Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, actually got in contact and said, don't do it. These are the concerns I had at the time. But I mean, equally, talk about what he may have done in the commission, etc. But, we know why he resigned from Northern Ireland. We know why he resigned from business secretary. The man has scandal draped around his neck. And all the things about, is he a suitable person, etc. No, he's not. And what I just simply can't accept of the comment being made in defence is he went through all the proper checks and processes. A professional civil service diplomat would have fallen at the first fence over the things that Peter Mandelson had to resign from government from. It is a two-tier system. So they just wanted to owe him, I think. He said, he did a lot to help Keir Starmer in the election, etc. it stinks. And the problem is, it's always somebody else's fault. There always needs to be an investigation. Take the Josh Simons thing about investigating Times journalists saying, well, I didn't know they were going to go that far. So I said, whoa, let's take a step back. You didn't like an article that exposed something about your organisation, so your instinct was to investigate them personally and try and bring them down. When did we ever get to that place in this country that a free press should be threatened by the people who are going to get into power? So then we have, well, there'll be a Cabinet Office investigation led by the man who did it. And it's always somebody else's fault. He's got to own this one. He should not have ever have appointed Peter Mandelson.
Barry Garner, you served in the Shadow Cabinet alongside Keir Starmer. The question is, will the PM survive these latest Mandelson revelations? And I mean, you didn't support him in the leadership election.
No, I didn't.
But do you think people are thinking, well, if I'd known then what I know now?
Well, I agree with something that Tony said, and I agree with something that Alex said. I think Sir Keir did know. So this idea, if I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't have appointed him. That doesn't wash. No. He did know that, but then so did everybody else. And actually, at the time, I didn't hear huge outcries saying, "Oh, this man's got to do with Epstein, and therefore we shouldn't appoint him." I think Keir would have been a lot better had instead of saying, "Oh, well, if I'd known then what I know now," I think if he'd come out and said, "Look, I got it wrong, straight off. I got it wrong. I made a bad judgment call. Let me explain to you why I made a bad judgment call."
And he has apologised.
I thought this guy, he's been a trade commissioner in Europe. He has huge and very deep connections in Washington. He knows how to handle trade, and we're going to have problems with Trump over tariffs and trade. It made sense in that level, but I was wrong. I should have looked at the relationship with Epstein and said, no, this is a step too far, we just can't do it. Even though I thought that he might be the person, as ambassador, to help the UK negotiate a better deal.
And can we just be clear on that relationship? Sorry to interrupt you, Barry, just to say on that relationship with Epstein, is that, as I understand it, Gordon Brown was warning that he felt Peter Mandelson was giving Epstein privileged information. So this is beyond the relationship with a convicted paedophile.
That was in retrospect, but let's just remember this is a subject of a police investigation.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. And Peter Mandelson denies any wrongdoing.
But Andrew's question was about Keir's judgment in general and whether the Labour Party would have elected him had they known what they know now about his
But that's like
judgment.
me saying, look, I've taken a member of staff who work for me and they're going into a care home and I failed to do my DBS checks and that person commits a crime within that care home. The buck stops with me, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, it comes back to Lyndon Johnson again, doesn't it? The buck stops with the Prime Minister.
Always does.
He can't just palm it off on Morgan McSweeney.
No, indeed. And where I agree with Alec is that we did have a very, very impressive ambassador in Washington at the time. And therefore, at a very deep level, this appointment was not necessary.
Lucy.
I think to the question of will the Prime Minister survive these latest revelations, I was surprised, frankly, that he survived the previous round, but it was at the absolute forefront of public opinion, public conversation. Now, I think he has the perfect... I guess, with the war in Iran going on, I think it would be very reasonable for him to turn around and say, I'm not going to resign over a matter I've already apologised for. There's currently going through police investigation when there is a war, and it's my place to represent the UK on a global stage.
But if you are a Labour MP who is sort of maybe a bit on the fence on, well, should he survive or not, you get after the May elections, which let's assume are not going to go particularly well for Labour. I think we can probably all agree on that.
Certainly not. I think we're going to do very, very well, young
well
man.
Done, Barry. Well done.
What's in that mug, Barry?
But my point is that this is going to be something that could tip the balance. If you're thinking, well, is Keir Starmer a man of great judgment and is he going to win us the next election? This is the sort of thing that over time accumulates. Think, well, it goes on the no side, doesn't it?
I think you're correct in that this could haunt him, but it's almost one of those cases where I feel that everybody who is already against Starmer is already against Starmer. I can't see this tipping more people.
Barry's nodding. He's one of them.
No, I just want the Labour Party to do well. And, you know, I agree with what Lucy's saying here. I don't think that this is any longer a salient issue in the minds of people.
Right, well, I've got to tip the balance now to go to the news headlines 5 minutes late. It's 8:35. Let's get the news headlines from Daisy Steele.
Leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Ian Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
8:38 on LBC. Barry Gardner is here, Labour MP for Brent West. Alex Shelbrooke, Conservative MP for Wetherby and Easingwold, which sounds very idyllic. Lucy Reid, columnist for The New World, and Tony Earnshaw, founder and chief executive of is it the UK Commercial Group or just UK Commercial Group? And what do you do?
UK Commercial Group. We are a national facilities management company. We have 4 offices around the UK and vans across the UK as well. We carry out things like servicing to air conditioning, kitchen extraction, down to things like window cleaning, gutters and drains. We're a facilities management company.
How did you get involved in it? Because, I mean, it's not, how can I put this, the most glamorous sounding area of the economy, but it's absolutely vital.
Well, it's a service industry, but it is vital to places like care homes, schools, hotels, offices. So yes, it's we got into it many years ago. I actually started when I was 19-year-old. I started the business with £300. I couldn't do it in this economy right now, but at the time, I managed to start the business and grow it, and we're taking just under £10 million a year now. So it's
wow. How many employees do you have?
About 140. So yeah, we're doing well. Yeah, it's a good business, and we've got a very loyal customer base.
Well, you've got lots of vans, which makes the next question very pertinent. In fact, I'm going to come to you first. It's a question from Rico. Whose responsibility is it to stop petrol and diesel prices zooming out of control?
At the minute, it's quite hard to stop them zooming out of control with the war that's currently going on in Iran. I think Labour were going to make it worse with the 5 pence fuel duty in September. Ultimately, it falls at the doorstep of the government to try and control these prices. We've got oil and gas in the North Sea, which we don't tap into enough. And for instance, I'll give you an example. We spend around about £40,000 a month on fuel. With the current prices, we predicted our fuel bill will be about £50,000 this month, so a £10,000 increase because of this war. Ultimately, it's costing me, my employees, and the average person across the UK. We are paying for this war, as far as I'm concerned.
So in the end, most businesses are complaining about the national insurance rise, which is stopping people from taking on more people. Well, if you've got another £10,000 a month added to your costs, I mean, that's another disincentive to take on or to expand.
Oh, I mean, it's crazy at the moment. Like you said, there was I think it was £25 billion national insurance tax raid in all businesses. I know a lot of businessmen, and actually people are feeling quite demotivated at the moment. We've got the new workers' rights bill coming out, which is smothering business. We've had minimum wage going up quite a lot, percentage, over the last few years. We had Nest, which came out quite a few years ago. But it's just, business have got broad shoulders, but at some point, it'll be the case of the feather that breaks the camel's back. And we feel like we get no support from the current government. Business is really hard. Like I said, I've been in business for 22 years. I started with very little. I don't believe I could do that now. I really don't. In this current economy. And it's sad. And, you know, when I started business it was like the early 2000s, it was championed when you started a business. There was a really good buzz. If you start a business, it was champ. Now I feel like it's a taboo. You start a business and you do well, you're getting put down, you're getting told you shouldn't be doing so well, and it feels like you're doing something wrong. Ultimately, business in this country pays for everything. This is how we circulate money and how we bring money into the economy. Without that, we can't pay for the police, we can't pay for NHS, we can't pay for MPs. So as far as I'm concerned, we need more support, and we need a Prime Minister and a Chancellor who's actually going to support business. And at the moment, we feel like we've got zero support, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart.
Alec.
So I think, right, the facts are instability is sending fuel up, fuel will come down. But what it doesn't need is another 6 pence being put on it. And businesses trying to plan around a difficult set of economic circumstances just need the Chancellor and the Prime Minister today to say, we're going to do what's happened for the last 15 years. We're not putting on the inflation.
Why should they say that now? Why isn't this too early? Because the oil prices might have come down to their former level within a very short time. We don't know that.
But why add more tax to business? So whether the prices come down or not, I mean, first of all, you said my constituency sounds idyllic. It is rural. You know, most people in rural constituencies have to drive their own vehicles. Putting more and more tax on them driving those vehicles is literally in some cases taking away their mobility. But we've just heard from a businessman. I'm a politician, okay? I look at things from a certain point of view. You've got a businessman sat here who's just said the price fluctuation is £10,000 a month. So maybe it comes back. Why put that back with the tax afterwards? You know, we've seen with national insurance, we've seen tax coming out of business constantly. And we've seen the highest levels of youth unemployment for the first time ever being higher than they are in Europe, the European continent. I mean, that should really make us stop and think, you know, what are we doing to business? So just make the commitment that stop playing, don't whip it out the hat of the budget and say, oh, guess what, everybody, I'm not putting 5 pence back on petrol, etc. Businesses need some help and stability along the way. This is where I think it goes wrong. And I was in for Rachel Reeves' statement about the economy, I think it was on Monday. I just thought it's a parallel universe. You're living in a parallel universe. The statements that are being made, she basically managed to say nothing for 40 minutes. I mean, nothing.
The spring statement talk about?
No, not the spring statement. She made a statement on the state of the economy because of the war on Monday.
That expired basically the same day.
And, well, again, she was talking about, well, the OBR said this. The OBR published those figures on the second week of January. Yeah. I mean, this is mad.
Barry.
Look, first of all, there are a lot of people who are going to be suffering, families who are going to be suffering as a result of the hike in oil prices. And I really do feel for them. I have to say I was surprised when Tony said that it was £10,000 on his fuel bill a month. That's awful.
I thought you could say a lot more than that, to be honest.
What surprised me was that, nonetheless, earlier this evening you said that you were fully in support of the war that's caused it. So it seems that there's a bit of doublethink there.
Well, I'm fully in support of the war because I think that Iran needs controlling and they are spreading terrorism across the world.
But you're not happy about the results of that, the consequences of that, which are putting £10,000 a month on your fuel bill. That's nobody else doing.
The prices up by 5 pence in September has nothing to do with the war.
That's the decision that you think.
It's a very silly thing to do.
But it wasn't the question, Barry. The question is about should you put 5 pence on it in tax?
Exactly.
Actually, it was about whose responsibility is it to stop petrol prices zooming out of control? Well, the responsibility is on the International Energy Agency, which today has released 400 million barrels from the strategic reserves of 13 different countries around the world. Now, that is, I think I'm right in saying, about 3 times as much as they did even when the Ukraine conflict saw the price of oil go through the roof.
Why aren't we using the reserves in the North Sea?
Yeah, that was the other thing that I wanted to pick you up on. You said oil and gas in the North Sea, we don't tap into enough. Actually, we don't tap into it. It's owned by companies who exploit the North Sea. It doesn't come into the UK. It goes onto the international market and it's sold on the international market. So this idea that we have a strategic reserve, which is the North Sea, I'm afraid just isn't the case.
So you were saying we own none of the North Sea?
No, what I'm saying is that you didn't understand the relationship of the people who own the oil in the North Sea. In fact, if you want to go into that relationship, we have had the lowest tax rate for the development of fields in the North Sea in the entire world. It was at 37%, when the global average is 75%.
But the fact is the government are refusing to allow new licences to exploit oil and gas in the North Sea.
Indeed, because...
So he was right.
No, he's not, because we don't tap into that.
Yeah, but
we don't get that oil and gas. It goes onto the international market.
But the tax revenues come into the economy and can be used to stop 5p fuel price.
The only reason that those it's a declining field, as you know, Ian. By 9% a year, the North Sea is a declining field, and the only way that the additional areas that are being exploited is competitive is because of the subsidies that are given in tax breaks to those companies to develop them.
Well, we could.
don't have to take it to
No,
the straight up numbers.
No, we haven't heard from Lucy yet, and I need to go to another break.
I mean, I'll say very quickly, I do sympathise with everybody on their points about those suffering with the cost of living crisis, increase in fuel duty, businesses. I agree, young youth unemployment is an issue that I write about a lot, and I agree there needs to be more injection into businesses to bring youth employment down. But I also agree with Barry, and I also think there's a lot of hypocrisy around the same people who do get very hysterical about fuel prices also tend to be the same people who treat net zero like a dirty word and don't want to talk about renewable energy and don't want to talk about ways to wean this country's energy resources off of crude oil and petrol, because every time there's a foreign war, like in Iran, like in Russia, the same thing happens. There's huge shocks and the price of oil massively skyrockets.
That's why we need to go for renewables.
And that's why we need to go for more renewable sources. But
But I don't know anybody that's arguing that renewables are a bad thing. I think even Nigel Farage doesn't argue that renewables are a bad thing. He just thinks the rush to net zero is damaging the economy because it's too fast.
But couldn't it be argued that if we rush to net zero, as you say, then we will avoid these kind of issues in the future where every time there is a foreign crisis...
But if you're putting your economy at a competitive disadvantage by doing so, which I think is one of the arguments used, then that can't be a good thing.
But it's to get to a competitive advantage quicker. That's the point.
Well, that's a big question as to whether that would happen, though, isn't there? But which we can't exploit now because we need to go on to some more questions. It's 8:49. 8:51. Barry Gardner, Alex Shelbrook, Lucy Reed, and Tony Earnshaw with us answering your questions. Right, a WhatsApp question from Jake: does the number of people who wanted to take part in this march, which has been banned, show how deeply divided our society has become along secular lines? Well, a bit of background to that. The Home Secretary yesterday accepted the Met Police's request to ban the Al-Quds Day march, which was due to take place in London on Sunday, over fears it could cause serious disorder because of the march's alleged links to the Iranian regime. I think we can take out the word alleged there, frankly. Lucy.
Oh, no follow-up, just ask. Okay. I don't know if it necessarily points to something as directly as how divided our society has become along sectarian lines. I'll admit the coverage of this over the last few days has really, I've found myself being pulled in both directions. I think the interview that you did just previously to this current show was really, really interesting. And I do think...
This was with the guy who's protesting outside the Foreign Office. He's been there since 2023.
Yeah. And I do think that there is a very interesting conversation to be had about this march. I mean, it's not been entirely banned. They are having a static demonstration now, I think, is what...
I don't know.
I think that's the rule. They can't march, but they can have a demonstration. I mean, I was at the National Gallery on Saturday and there was a pro-royal family in Iran demonstration that was shouting, "Thank you, Bibi, thank you, Trump," much to the horror of people queuing for the National Gallery. I think this conflict has definitely demonstrated just how deep our perceptions of foreign conflicts and domestic issues really go. I do think that banning protests always is a difficult conversation to have and is always one that definitely sends hackles at people's spines. It sends hackles at my spine. And I mean, to be honest, I don't have a straight answer, but I think it's a very complex debate.
Well, I completely sympathise with you because we did a phone-in 9 o'clock hour last night on it as to whether it should be banned. And I found myself saying, well, my heart says, absolutely, we don't want these evil chants on our streets. But then my head says, yeah, but free speech is an important thing. And even though they might be chanting things that I would 100% find abhorrent, is that the right reason to ban something?
And you do have to think from an optics perspective. This is the first march, I think, to be banned officially since 2012.
Yep.
And if you think about the main headlines around arrests at protests in the last year or so, have all been at pro-Palestine marches with associations with Palestine Action. Obviously, this specific day is very tied to anti-Israel sentiment. If you look at the optics of this from the government's perspective, for people who come from a pro-Palestine, pro-Gaza, not necessarily anti-Israel, but definitely in that sort of pro-Palestine perspective, you can see that the optics of this just makes perfect fodder to accuse this government of exactly what a lot of people are accusing them of, which is not being in support of Palestine.
Okay, Barry.
I think it was the right decision to ban the march. I think we're talking about, and you rightly scrubbed the word alleged, the connection with the Iranian regime at a time when we have had our bases attacked by Iran. I think that connection in itself, I'm not sure that it shows how deeply divided our society has become, but I think it does show a number of things. And that is that that our country has been infiltrated by extremists from the Iranian regime in a deeply unsettling way, that they're able to whip up this sort of protest. And that concerns me greatly. I absolutely agree with what you said about the importance of freedom of speech. It's absolutely right that we should be able to go and say things and that offend other people. That's what freedom of speech is about. It's about the right to offend. But actually, I think the reason I would agree with the decision to ban it is because I think this is more than just the right to offend people being exercised. Sorry, Lucy, you want to comment?
And I also do say, I do agree with you in the sense that the reasoning for the Met asking the Home Office to ban this is because of heightened tensions around this specific march, around this specific day. The reason why I brought up sort of pro-Iranian royalty protesters earlier was to say that I can understand the perspective from the Metropolitan Police of saying this is a particularly tense time to have this specific march. Okay. So I can definitely understand
Tony.
that.
I think it was 100% right to be banned. As far as I'm concerned, our allies are at war with Iran. We've been bombed ourselves at the RAF site in Cyprus. During World War II, would we have allowed pro-Hitler protests to be allowed on our streets? I don't think so.
Alec?
It is the right thing to ban it. I think one of the problems here is that they can't be policed in terms of arresting the people and charging the people who blatantly break the law. And I'm going to bring it back to the one thing we've not mentioned in this context is about how scared the Jewish community are to be on the streets when these things are taking place. Now, I speak as somebody who has a Jewish community. There's a huge Jewish community in Leeds. My Jewish community, Jews in Leeds, are scared to go into Leeds city centre at a weekend when these protests are happening. Now, you are allowed freedom of speech, and I absolutely support freedom of speech. I'm a member of the Free Speech Union. We have laws in place to protect people, and until they can be properly policed, so that the people who are intimidating and inciting violence against Jewish communities, which is blatant anti-Semitism because they're saying Israel are doing this and you are Jewish, so it's your fault. That is blatant anti-Semitism. And until the police can say we can properly police these events, we can take the action within the laws we have to protect all citizens in this society, then no, these events should not be going ahead.
Right, let's go to our fun question. It's from Ben in Crawley. A film is going to be made about the life of John Bon Jovi, but who would you want to play you in a biopic about you? Barry?
I'd want the stupidest, ugliest, most inarticulate person they could find so that people would look at it and say, you know, that Barry Gardner, he wasn't actually that bad.
I was going to say, do you have a self-worth issue? Alec?
So when I was big fat Alex 7 stone ago, people first of all used to say I look like John Goodman, but I was when I had a NATO conference in Montreal, we were on Air Canada, and the stewardess did a double take, and she came up to me and said, "Oh," she said, "I'm sorry. I thought you were the actor in Modern Family, Cam." And so maybe I'll have to be him.
No idea who that is. Tony?
I haven't got a funny answer, but you have to be my daughter. She's more beautiful, more intelligent, and much wiser than I am.
It'd be like a female James Bond then.
Lucy?
Well, I'm only 22, so if you made a film of my life, I don't think it'd be very interesting.
Could be a short film.
Could be a short film, I suppose. Well, I don't have an answer, so I was going to say that if they made a film of my life, it would probably be in many, many years, so the actress probably hasn't been born yet. That's my way of
I'm going to say
answer.
Taylor Swift.
Oh. Well, that's a very nice compliment.
Take it.
Oh, I'm not going to insult you, am I? Oh, I did Barry, but there we are. We have another fun text here about you, Barry. Please, could you wish Barry a belated happy birthday for yesterday? I think I've got that right. That's from Marion in Bromley, who is Baroness Grender's auntie.
Oh, God bless you, Marion. Thank you very much. Yes, but please don't read out the bit in brackets.
Which is Barry's age. I wouldn't do that to you. Thank you all very much indeed. Now, on tomorrow's panel, we have the former Conservative Cabinet Minister Dame Theresa Villas, Human Rights campaigner Peter Tatchell, Labour MP Danny Beales, and the Free Speech Union's Connie Shaw. So they'll be here to take your questions from 8 o'clock tomorrow. Well, in the next hour, I'm going to be joined by Abby Foster, personal finance expert. She's going to take your calls about the financial consequences of this war in Iran. We've all seen petrol and diesel prices go up massively. My local petrol station, it's gone up from 140 to 155 almost overnight. Oil prices do seem to be coming down. But what are the implications for us all as consumers? Because it's not just fuel that's going to be affected here. It's going to be all over the economy. So your questions to Abby Foster in just a moment.